Starting with heritage at risk, we're talking built heritage at risk, not around texts or around cultural heritage and sort of more intangible capacities. And I want to take you back to 1858 and the old church of St Mary. And in that year, the new church opened, which you think would be a cause for great celebration. But in fact, people weren't necessarily overjoyed. That mainly focused on their attachment to the old church, to the extent that up to 300 of them kept on attending services within the old church building. They believed, rightly or wrongly, that there were intentions by the priests to convert the church into a school or maybe demolish the old building altogether, and they weren't having any of that. And so this reached a point where no less than the Bishop of London eventually agreed that yes, the old church will stay and it will be a vicar shared with the new church across the road and will become a chapel of ease for Stoke Newington. So thus we have two churches on either side of Church Street to this very day. And I think this, in a way, in a very mid-19th century fashion, sort of is heritage at risk in action. And also I wonder if we can perceive it in the geography of Abney Park Cemetery, opened in 1840, one of the garden cemeteries of London, but based on the earlier grounds of Fleetwood and Abney houses, and thus framing the layout of the cemetery were things like the Yew Walk, the Elm Walks, and probably most famously Watts Mound in the northern corner. So again, is this a reflex of people's attachment to what was there before, and the idea that not everything, Amir's talk was really interesting for just kind of this bold new vision being stretched out across up to 476 acres of land in this area. You know, are we actually seeing sort of almost the opposite of people going, there's something valuable and worth preserving in a time of what was quite rapid change? And I think we absolutely know that we still have this this reflex today. And last month was London Festival of Architecture, and so I attended several events across the course of the festival, all around this idea, this one here, whose heritage is it anyway, I spoke at, and all of them were kind of focused on where do we draw the line between retaining buildings and where do we think, no, we can lose that to build something new, something better. And I met a friend just on the weekend who actually came to my talk. He was like, everyone was really just saying the same thing, agreeing with one another. It's kind of quite eerie. And I think that wasn't intentional, but I think it also speaks to a few things. Firstly, around where architecture is at the moment. I'm not an architect, and not all of the people speaking were architects, but I think there's definitely something around greater appreciation of this aesthetic merits of older buildings, around the sustainability angle now, probably not even 10 years ago that would come into the equation, as well as the legal frameworks that we have in place for both the recognition of historic buildings for being of heritage merit, and also around when recognising when these things are at risk and to the point where something needs to be done. And so this is what I'm going to run you through tonight, both the kind of the technical side of things. I'm not an expert on this, so but I chair the Hackney Society's Buildings at Risk group, and so I've picked up a few things along the way. And in the process, we're going to have a little think about why heritage assets, and hopefully, if heritage asset is a planning term, hopefully it's pretty self-explanatory as to what that means. I'll be using it a lot tonight. Why they become at risk, what the Buildings at Risk group, where we kind of have a role to play, and also kind of right at the end, hopefully, enough time to pick a bit at what is heritage and what is therefore worth preserving. So the Hackney Society probably had Janet accost you on the way in to join us, or at least find out more about us. We're a civic society, we're not a history society, so we kind of look both backwards and forwards. We want to retain what's good about existing Hackney, but also encourage new development that contributes positively to the borough and hopefully in time becomes future heritage itself. Been going since 1967, and I absolutely adore this quote from a letter printed in the Hackney Gazette, which was announcing the intention to form the society, for two reasons. Both because it kind of presupposes there's a lot of old ruins to prop up within the borough, and indeed there were, but also because it kind of captures the flavour of the moment. This was a period still, well, After the war, the idea was that much with all the destruction from the Blitz, here was the opportunity to build a new, better future for everyone through various things, including new housing and so other types of building. And so that was very much the direction of travel for the good couple of decades. But I think in the mid-1960s, there's sort of this identified golden period of the civic societies, and this is which the formation of the Hackney Society falls, where that was just starting to curdle, and the idea that there's a better future through better new buildings was not being manifest in what was being built and the lived experience of people through them. So the idea was something like the Hackney Society was to actually question where things are worth preserving and retaining. And right from the get-go, this was very much the Hackney Society's activist phase, and there was a lot to try and protect, including the example here of Sandford Terrace, facing onto Stoke Newington Common, which was subject to the compulsory purchase order to make it site part of the adjacent estate, completely redevelop it. That was thwarted. Instead, the Hackney Council was persuaded to restore the buildings, and as a result, they won, let's find this, a commendation at the exhibition held at Covent Garden as part of the European Architectural Heritage Year, 1975. I really hope that still exists in Hackney Archives or somewhere close. Now, this period sort of petered out towards the end of the 70s, and that was largely because the big redevelopment projects and things like the closure of the North London line, those campaigns were finished and no new ones were coming in their place. The winds of change were blowing, and the Society saw this, and I think it's no coincidence. This is when we start publishing books, and we have a really brilliant run of books from 1978 all through the 80s and beyond, which are foundational for understanding Hackney's historic built environment and its contemporary built environment in some regards. And the best of these not only identify a particular issue, but also then provide the information, the evidence to present to very often like Hackney Council to try and get them to change their ways. And in doing so, by publishing as part of a membership organisation, we're winning the hearts and minds of the public as well. I think it's really, really canny. And there's none better than, I speak as the chair of the Buildings at Risk group here, so I'm a little bit biased, but none better at doing this than the Buildings at Risk in Hackney book published by the Society, written by Elizabeth McKellar in 1987. It's a real snapshot of Hackney Council and its terrible, frankly, stewardship of its historic built environment. This was a time when it owned a lot of old houses, other old buildings within the borough, and just was not looking after them. And this is very much a kind of call to action and sort of trying to prick the conscience of the council to do better. I'm going to skip on because I want to talk about 21st century Hackney to sort of situate the work of the Buildings at Risk group a bit better. And we all have at least travelled through Hackney to come here, so we sort of know some of the issues at hand around sort of post-2009 local authority austerity, the shakedown from the Olympiad of 2012, general gentrification, hipsterification of large swathes of the borough. This is what Lisa Shell, in an absolutely brilliant chapter, I absolutely adore this chapter she wrote. It's really like hit on the nose. She is now chair of our planning group who scrutinise planning applications. She's an architect, and she knows the lie of the land and the issues at hand better than anyone, and just articulates them absolutely brilliantly. So let's shuffle on to the Heritage at Risk Register. I noticed this quote here, actually a bit too late for me to pick it up when I was doing the slides, but this is slightly incorrect. In 1991, there was a London-wide register of buildings at risk issued by English Heritage. The first national Heritage at Risk register came along in 1998. Every year still produced in partnership between local planning authorities, so in this case Hackney, and Historic England, formerly English Heritage. And One thing you'll notice there, in 1991, 101 entries in the register. 18 years later, that was down to 32. So quite a substantial downward trend. And that continues to this day in some respects. The buildings you see at the bottom there, most famously Abney Park, was on the register since 1998, came off in 2024 as a result of that incredible project and all the work that went in behind it from the Abney Park Preservation Trust and so on and so forth. In the middle there, 91 Stoke Newington Church Street, which was in a state of disrepair for a couple of years from 2013. The register galvanised the owner into action, and off the register it came in 2015. The same year as the gas house by the East Reservoir as part of its regeneration into sort of the cafe visitor centre that many of you will know and love. So we, as the Buildings at Risk Group, were founded in 2024 in November, shortly after the publication of the Heritage at Risk Register for that year. And there were 33 Hackney entries on it, which we thought, that's quite high. Only a little later we actually look back in time and find that Hackney consistently has a high number. We're starting on the graph here at 20, so those variations aren't actually that extreme in the grand scheme of things. And so we wanted to understand why that was. You know, this time when supposedly there's greater inward investment in the built environment of the borough than ever before, why have we still got so many historic buildings at risk? And we haven't got the money to sort of dish out to pay for the restoration of buildings. We have heritage professionals as members, but we're not kind of a professional body who can kind of give formal advice. We really exist as a kind of a group where people can come together, a forum to share information and therefore kind of drive awareness, connect people to one another so that, you know, ultimately everyone benefits. And I think the worst thing is for no information to be in the public domain, because people inevitably think the worst. And we often find out that's very much not the case. There's always someone trying to do something positive, and so that's what we're kind of here just to give a little bit of a platform to. We don't just cover buildings, we're a bit of a misnomer, I think we might have to change it at some point. We cover other structures, we cover open spaces as well, kind of neatly encapsulated in that picture there. We deal with three different strands, the first of which is designated heritage assets. So these are the most important heritage assets covered by legal protections. They're called statutory listed assets sometimes. Clissold House, a listed building, Clissold Park, a registered park, which sits within the Clissold Park Conservation Area, which itself is deemed a designated heritage asset. Secondly, probably should have put up here locally listed heritage assets because you can have a non-designated heritage asset that isn't on a local list. Local lists are brilliant. They're for heritage assets that are important but not necessarily of national significance or haven't yet been recognised as national significance. They are given kind of an esteem of and recognition of being of local importance, and their preservation becomes kind of an aim of the planning process. There's over 500 in Hackney. I couldn't actually find one that the Buildings at Risk Group had kind of focused on within Stoke Newington, and I thought I'm talking to an audience here who know, all historians, so they'll know like the 1965 and before borough boundaries. So I've tried to like include everything that was within that, but I had to look outside just across Stoke Newington Road to West Hackney Church and the rectory behind it, which is locally listed, beautiful building. Currently, its gardens are the subject of plans by the Diocese of London to build an eco-rectory, whatever that is, and a row of terraced houses fronting onto Amherst Road. Eating, it's an absolutely beautiful garden that's used as a space for all sorts of different groups, as well as being a wonderful wildlife resource. And also, therefore, the rectory is likely to be sold off and converted. So, brilliant little campaign group behind that. Find out more about that if you want. Finally, unrecognised heritage assets, a bit of a loose term here, but something that's not been recognised as yet. And here you'll see the drinking trough on Albion Parade, And this is part of a project we did last year to record 4 of these across the borough, none of which have any form of listed status, to put them forward for local listing. It was absolutely brilliant, fun. We're going to be doing something again very similar in the autumn, so if you're kind of inspired at all by this and you like historic street furniture, well, have I got the little project for you. Okay, so what does this actually look like in practice? Now, the Heritage at Risk Register focuses only on the designated heritage assets. In this case, all of these are buildings. Like I say, I've been cleaving to the 1965 and before Stoke Newington borough boundaries. So this church will be known to quite a good number of you at the northeastern tip of Stoke Newington Common, but unfortunately I can't say anything more about it because I'm a purist. But there's enough churches that are at risk. About half of Hackney's now 35 Heritage at Risk Register entries are either churches or structures related to churches. And so I thought I'd start in the shadow of one of them, Matthias. And this speaks to kind of why a lot of these churches are on the register. It's a huge building built for a congregation which isn't quite as huge today as it was in the 19th century. And also a second recurrent issue that we find, the failing post-Second World War roof replacement. And I stole this picture off on the left off the parish website. It shows, I hope you can see that, the roof was all the roofs were badly damaged during the war. When it was restored, post-war, roof went on, but it wasn't of the quality, hasn't been maintained. So all the roofs are now failing. One lot of grant funding was accessed to pay for the restoration of the nave roof, but others remain to be done. These are huge, complex projects, but they can be delivered. And the Church of St Andrew across Stoke Newington up towards Stamford Hill, beautiful church. I don't know if you can see on the right-hand side there, but there's wall paintings that have suffered damage, partly through water ingress from the previously leaking roofs. These have, 2/3 of them have been replaced. Behind that stands several things. A parish that is motivated to do something about their building. Grant funding applications are plenty, working with heritage regeneration project advisors, specialists of many stripes and backgrounds. All boils down to 2 things really, time and money, and a lot of both of them are needed. And so we have a church will be familiar to many of you, the Old Church of St Mary, and this is very much, I'm not even sure it's the starting line of this process. You will hopefully be aware of the Take the Strain Off the Drain, wonderfully named campaign. Ideally, you've contributed a little bit to it as well, to repair the pipes associated with the toilet within the building. That, as I understand, has been funded, but is not the reason why it's on the Heritage at Risk Register. That's to do with the walls and, surprise, surprise, the ceiling. As if that wasn't enough, it sits in a wonderful churchyard that I think many of you will realise is actually not looking at its best. And we're contacted by the London Middlesex Archaeological Society partway through last year, and they raised the state of the churchyard. They were particularly concerned about it, both the memorials, that wall on the right there, and fabulously we got a response from Caroline Woodley, who enlightened us to the fact that there's a faculty being applied for to have to go through the diocese to repair that wall, which was part of the original north aisle, destroyed in 1940, capped. Trees grew out of it subsequently. They've been cut down, but obviously that's not how you want a wall to look. And also repairs to one of the monuments within the churchyard. There are many within the churchyard, and I don't know which one it is, but many of them would be nationally listed if it was a rural church. So it's a very important site, and I think it is unfortunately suffering both the building and the churchyard for the fact there's so many people involved. The parish own both, but the church is leased and run by the old church. The council maintains the churchyard. There's also the diocese to consider, other stakeholder groups. I think it just needs a bit more coordinated effort in order to actually see something improve. Historic buildings don't repair themselves. It's another of my favourite sayings. Moving on to private buildings, 2 here, which again, quite local landmarks. 175, an early 18th century building with a very mid-21st century prop holding up the front of it. 2 doors up, 179, the restaurant that Amy's already flagged. Both of these, business has been shut for several years. I'm not sure the buildings were particularly well maintained before that, so we have issues where new owners have taken them on, brought forward mixed-use refurbishment projects, and have come up multiple factors, one of which is cost. So enabling developments have been proposed in the rear gardens, but that contravenes the guidance around the conservation area in which they sit. And I mean, it's a glib point to make, but listed buildings tend to congregate in conservation areas. So, you know, there's a lesson, if anything, to be learnt around, you know, it's fine, it's wonderful people taking on old buildings to try and restore them to full working order, but they're very complex beasts, and also in a conservation area is an additional layer of protection to be considered. Finally, public buildings and the Stoke Newington municipal buildings. Don't need to go into the reasons that it's been vacant for quite a large number of years. We're fortunate to actually make some headway on understanding quite what's going on with the works, thanks to an email from the now ex-cabinet member lead for planning and regeneration, Guy Nicholson, at the end of last calendar year. He said, going to give us a pretty good overview of what's going on, and start with the works you've seen happening on this building, not the library, so excluding the reference library on the right-hand side, even though that's formally part of the municipal buildings. Works to do fire safety system and a new air source heat pump, try saying that in a hot room, have been installed. There's now kind of assessments being made of around getting the roof redone, which is the main failing point of the building, and then also to bring the public spaces back into use, probably because they make so much money with all those weddings that parties used to see outside that you don't anymore. I think the council could do with some of that cash coming back their way. And there's a broader project behind all of this that I think is in very incipient stages, and I think has hardly moved forward as far as we understand it in the past year or so, to try and just reimagine the whole building, probably in partnership with a private operator. So there'll be a mix of non-residential uses, public, private, who quite knows what. But having done a recent public event all about Haggerston Baths, I hope that, unlike there, the public access and public facilities are given more forefront in the planning process, because they're very much felt like an afterthought within Haggerston Baths. And the scheme didn't fail for that reason, but it's actually quite merciful that it did, because hopefully now something better will come through that really is focused around public benefits as well as getting the funding necessary. Quickly wrapping up now, future heritage at risk. We are feeding stuff through with the eyes and ears on the ground for the council and for Historic England. And so a couple have caught my eye, certainly a 109 Church Street, above Church Street Food and Wine. That is not a happy looking 18th century half of a house. The windows are in terrible state, and they have been since 1987, our Buildings at Risk book. It was in a pretty parlous state then, so something isn't right there. There's been no planning application or any indication work is happening above the shop floor level, so who knows about that. And another post-war roof that is failing and leaking and needs replacement at New Church of St Mary. And the parish are well aware it's going to cost in the millions. The heating system needs doing, so they're probably going to do it all at once. But again, heritage at risk, it might seem like a negative, but being on the register actually opens up greater access to advice and to funding opportunities. So it's potentially a good thing. So we'll see on that. Lastly, because I have to think about quite where we draw the line on built heritage in the broadest sense, so I want to just kind of get you leaving by thinking about kind of what's heritage, what should be preserved, starting with the Banksy on Church Street, painted in 2001 without any sort of permission, but clearly as a public artwork. It was later given advertising consent. That's the kind of what gets graffiti to a stay of execution in the planning process. But this site in front, is in the second photo, looking as if it's in front of the mural, is up for sale at present. If you've got a few million, then it could be yours. There's already established precedent for new buildings to be built on it. So do we want to keep a full open view of the mural, or do we want just it to be kind of visible through a glazed entrance lobby perhaps? And we were fine, it's not even art, it's not even heritage, just chisel it off and sell it off to some idiot in Dubai. You know, this is kind of like some of the things that we have to consider, and I think it's really interesting. I'd be kind of interested to see what happens and kind of what the public reaction is on that. There's 146 Church Walk, the last kind of post-industrial derelict building in Stoke Newington. And it looks old, and it's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, quite old, probably very late 19th century, very start of the 20th century. Built as a factory, very functional, very little decoration, not really intended to be anything ostentatious or, you know, refined. Hasn't, so it's a functional building, it hasn't functioned as its intended purpose for decades, hasn't even been opened for a long, long time. And I've included that view because just across the street you can see this building on the right, which was completed in 2013. It's a small residential development that won multiple architectural awards. My kind of little thought experiment for you is, like, pound for pound, I believe that building on the right is a better building than the building on the left. It's kind of more architecture distinguished, it's kind of grown into itself, it contributes more to the street scene of that bit of Church Walk. So, if proposals came forward to demolish 146 as it stands, to replace it with a high quality, and I know that's somewhat subjective, development instead of kind of a more contemporary design like that, should that be opposed purely because that's a building over 100 years old and it's kind of, you know, earned its right to exist? Is there kind of an argument made on the sort of intangible industrial heritage of that building? Should that kind of be given some form of recognition? I mean, it's also the question of embodied carbon and the fact that the most sustainable building is the one already built. You know, there's all these issues that go way beyond the Buildings at Risk group, but I think we nonetheless see, and we see more and more now. I think it's kind of quite an interesting point on which to end. I'll just say, if you liked any of what you've heard, why not come along and join a Buildings at Risk group meeting? We meet on Zoom. It's 1 hour a month, second Monday of each month, 6 to 7 p.m. We're lovely. I am interested in 11th and 12th century Romanesque architecture and 20th century modernism. I chair this group nonetheless, and we deal with 18th and 19th century buildings aplenty, so there's no expertise required. It's just, you know, a love for the historic built environment in some way, shape or form of the borough of Hackney, be it just Stoke Newington, be it particular types of building. Come along, why not have a go? Email me, Buildings at Risk, and I'll add you to the mailing list. Check out our webpage, Heritage at Risk register, loads of information on the Historic England website. Hackney Council has also many brilliant pages around historic environment stuff and planning and so forth. Then Janet, here's me doing my bit. Follow us on Instagram and all the rest of it. Buy books off us, become a member. Buy a tote, they're great collector's items already. And the Hackney History Festival 2027, put it in your diaries. There may even be something about this, who knows. But thank you so much.